is Mike Campbell, and he served. I'm going to read this right from his website. Good evening, Mike. You are now live on the air.
Good evening, Bill.
Thank you.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your interest and hard work getting this interview online. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem. I'm going to read a little bit of your biography so the folks are up to speed a little bit on your history and who you are. This comes right from his website. Let me see here. It is called EarhartTruth.com. EarhartTruth.com. Mike served as an award-winning writer while on active duty with the U.S. Navy and as a civilian journalist and public affairs officer with the Department of Defense. Mike retired from federal service in 2008. Mike met Thomas E. Devine, author of the 1987 classic Witness the Amelia Earhart Incident in 1988. He was convinced that Devine, Fred Goerner, Vincent V. Loomis, Paul Brand Jr., and others were correct when they claimed that Earhart and Fred Noonan died on Saipan after their disappearance in 1937. After 14 years, that's amazing, Mike, of collaboration with Devine, With Our Own Eyes, Eyewitnesses to the Final Days of Amelia Earhart was published in 2002 by a small Ohio company. His new book is Amelia Earhart, The Truth at Last. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks. So where do we go from here, Bill? Where do we want to start? This story has consumed 25 years of my life, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still trying to get the word out about the truth. What do you want to start with?
Let's for the people that, there's a lot of kids out there, the younger generations, and even people that are, around our age that don't know the real nitty-gritty of the history of that last flight that she took and what led up to it and exactly what her history was before that. I have a document that you sent me up on the screen for those of you that are over on the video side over at USSAMichigan.com. And she broke quite a few records in the 1930s, didn't she?
Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, in July of 1933, she broke her own previous transcontinental speed record. In January of 1935, she became the first person to solo the 2,400-mile distance across the Pacific between Honolulu and Oakland, which is pretty amazing at the time. And it was also the first flight where a civilian aircraft carried a two-way radio, which is really something back then. In April of 35, she was the first person to fly solo from Los Angeles to Mexico City in 13 hours. And on May 8th of 1935, she was the first person to fly solo nonstop from Mexico City to Newark, New Jersey in 14 hours. That's she was a very good pilot, wasn't she?
Absolutely, she was a superstar. She was huge in those days. There were other female pilots as well who were also well known. Viola Gentry, Jackie Cochran, Eleanor Smith come to mind. She wasn't alone, but she was in a class by herself, especially after she became the second person to solo fly across the Atlantic in May 1932. This was an incredible achievement from Amelia Earhart. She became the second person, as I said, and the flight from Havre de Grace, Newfoundland, to Londonderry Island, which was over 2,000 miles, to read the accounts of her solo flight across the Atlantic is really amazing. She had ice storms, she had wind, rain, she had a manifold fire or a manifold exhaust fire. The plane the plane at some points in the flight was upside down, according to her. Just for her to hang on and survive the flight was amazing. Her sister, Muriel Morrissey, wrote a book along with Carol Osborne in the 80s called Amelia, My Courageous Sister, to talk about that. I would suggest after your listeners buy my book, if they're if they're interested, they can look at this one too. And there's so many other ones, though. I mean, there's hundreds of biographies of Amelia Earhart, but there's so few books about the disappearance of Amelia Earhart, which is what we're going to be talking. That's the main event here tonight. The history of her accomplishments and the history of her life is absolutely undisputed and well known to anyone who, I mean, especially in the old days, but I mean nowadays most people under 50 have never heard of her. Anyway, as far as her achievements, there was no doubt. After 1932, she was really the superstar female of flight. She was called America's First Lady of Flight, as a matter of fact, as a result of the Atlantic crossing.
Yeah, I want to go over a little bit as we get rolling here and talk about that last flight and everything that led up to that and the course that you took and everything else. I've got a passage here from your book. It's up on the screen right now. And for those of you, from my good friends over at Godlike Productions and everybody that I've emailed and everything, if you're watching the show and this is the first time you watched it, on the screen, if you're watching the video side, everything that is in red letters, it comes from an external document. And everything tonight is paragraphs from Mike's book to show you exactly how good of a writer this guy is. You got to read this thing. It's an amazing book. It's really the ultimate in the Amelia Earhart tale. And it starts like this. As the golden age of aviation wound to a close, 39-year-old Amelia Mary Earhart, prepared for a final record-breaking flight, one that would punctuate the most storied female career in aviation history, a circumnavigation of the globe at the equator, the longest such flight ever attempted. And you have to remember, back then, ladies and gentlemen, they didn't have jets, they didn't have airliners. They had piston-driven prop airplanes is what they had. They didn't have your turboprops or anything else. This is running on gasoline and a piston-powered engine. Her announcement came at a long-anticipated press conference in February at the Barclay Hotel in New York. And with her during that press conference was her husband, George Putnam, and Captain Harry Manning, and he was a pilot, a navigator, and a master mariner of the United States line. Manning agreed to serve as the navigator on the flight, and Fred Noonan, he was an experienced navigator for Pan American Airways, would later join the team. Do you know, Mike, exactly why she decided to change the course of the around the world trip? Because if I'm correct, I believe at first she was going to go she was going to go west around the world, and then she changed it to go east around the world. Why did she do that?
Well, her reasoning officially was that she said the weather patterns had changed because they took off in March of 1937 from Hawaii's Luke Field, but they had what they called a ground loop, but she crashed on takeoff. It was really a mess. I mean, she could have been killed, but she wasn't badly hurt. The plane was really banged up. It took I think 2 months to repair it. They took it from Luke Field to Burbank, California, to do the repairs, and then they were ready to go by June again of 1937. At that point, she said that they changed the route to accommodate the weather patterns or whatever. This is one of the areas that it's a bit murky. It's conspiracy theorists, which I am not one of, sometimes use that as an excuse to say that she was on, a spy flight from the beginning or whatever, and she changed directions at the behest of the United States government. It's possible. We don't know. We just don't know. But what we do know is that on June 2nd, 1937, she left Oakland, and she was on her way around the world. Now, a month later is where we get to the to the departure from Lae, New Guinea, in her 27,000-mile flight around the world, which would have eclipsed Wiley Post by 12,000 miles, the world record for circumnavigation. She wouldn't have just beaten his record; she would have destroyed it. But on July 2nd, 1937, she took off from Lae, New Guinea, on her flight to Howland Island, and this is where this is where the plot thickens. This is where she was lost. The flight from Lae, New Guinea to Howland Island was 2,556 miles. The flight had never been made. Howland Island was specially prepared with a landing strip for her to land there and refuel. And the plan was for her to refuel at Howland, and then from Howland to fly about 1,900 miles to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii back to Oakland, completing the flight. Okay, so that's the name of that tune as far as leading up to setting up the last flight, I think.
Yeah, I've been showing pictures of the first takeoff from Luke Field, and then the damages to the aircraft, which was a Lockheed 10E, wasn't it?
A Lockheed Electra 10E, yes.
Yes.
There were several models of the 10, the Lockheed 10, but hers was the 10E. You want to talk about the plane for a minute? What it was, what it had?
I've seen somebody built one of the Lockheed Electras and made it exactly like her plane when she was doing that flight, and I've seen that several times at air shows. I've got some great photographs of that thing in the air. It's one of my favorite planes. I love the sound of those engines.
Yeah, well, it was considered state of the art in those days. I mean, it was. Basically, it was an all-metal, low-wing, twin-engine, 10-passenger airplane. Two Pratt & Whitney Wasp S3H1 engines, 550 horsepower each. Extra fuel tanks gave her a total of about 1,150 gallons of fuel and a 4,000-mile range. The plane would cruise at about 140 to 150 miles an hour with a top speed of 200 miles per hour. In those days, it was just about as good as you got, and that's why she had that plane. And it was basically donated to her. The funds were basically donated to her from several people that she knew through Purdue University. Their names are not important. Some people believe that money came from the government. As that's just another theory. She didn't buy the plane herself, though. It was funds came from all different places.
Now that after that crash on at Luke Field, she had to pay for all of those repairs herself, didn't she?
Yes, her and George Putnam paid for the repairs to the plane, which really right there is another strong indicator that she was not asked to crash that plane, as some theorists believe, on purpose, so that she could change directions and do a new flight according to government specifications. If she would have crashed that plane under government orders, they would have paid for the repairs. We know from research done by outstanding researchers, one of which is Bill Primack, who's 85 years old now, lives in Broomfield, Colorado, and he's done a lot of research around this plane, and you can take his research to the bank.
Yeah, let me throw up a picture of Bill Primack. There he is right there on the screen. That's Bill on the right side wearing the blue cap in this photo. That's, I believe, one of his trips to Saipan, if I'm not mistaken.
But that was, if it's the photo I sent you, is it the one of Primack and Joro? I'm not in front of the computer.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's Primack in the Marshall Islands on, well, we'll get to that. It's in the Marshalls, however.
Yep, yeah. There's the photograph of them. And this story with the...
that was 1989.
1989. This story with the her last flight, that, good Lord, where do we start on this one, Mike?
Well, I think the most important thing that people need to know about the last flight is that because we need to get to really what my book is all about. Up until the last flight in her sign-off message, That information is available everywhere, and it's not disputed even by the government. The most important thing that people need to remember about the last flight is that she never established two-way communications between herself and the Coast Guard cutter Itasca that was anchored off of Howland Island. It was there to talk her into help her to find the island because it was just a dot of land in the vast Pacific. What she was trying to accomplish was very difficult in those days. The flight had never been done. She was very casual about her radio arrangements. Noonan was never heard from during the flight. She was never on the air to the Itasca longer than 7 or 8 seconds at a time, which would have made it impossible for the Itasca to get a bearing on her with their direction-finding equipment. Okay, so she acted during her last flight as if she didn't want to be found, as if she didn't want the Itasca to find her. This is one of the major pieces of evidence that suggest that she didn't want to land on Howland Island and that she was engaged in some sort of a mission. Okay, so I think that's what people need to understand. And she also, the other part of it is that Fred Noonan was never heard from during the flight. He was the navigator. He was the brains behind the flight, and he was never heard from on the radio. Okay, but this was not unusual because she was the one that was always heard from on the radio during the world flight. This has been attributed to the fact that George Putnam micromanaged the flight and made sure that he wasn't heard from, and because he wanted Amelia to get all the glory. It was all about her. None of it was about Noonan. Noonan was just like a piece of baggage there, but he was a very important a part of that team because he was the navigator, and he was the one whose job it was to find Howland Island ostensibly. I mean, officially that was the plan, but it didn't come out that way. So after several messages, I mean, we can go to her final two messages. At 08:03, 8:03 a.m. local time on Howland Island, they got this message from Amelia Earhart, KHAQQ calling Itasca. We received your signals but unable to get a minimum. Please take bearing on us and answer 3105 with voice. What she's saying is that she received their signals that were sent at, I believe, 7,500 kilocycles. But she weren't able to get a minimum. That means that they couldn't get a bearing on the signal that was being sent because she didn't have the equipment to get the bearing. She wasn't set up to get a bearing on that. Her whole understanding of radio was messed up. She didn't have a good sense of radio. She was very slipshod in her radio understandings, and all this came to roost during this final flight. Okay, unless of course, it was part of the plan. It was all part of the plan. We don't know either way. Anyway, after she says, "Please take a bearing on us," she goes off again, and she followed with a series of long dashes, but they were unable to get a fix on the Itasca. Now, Bill Primack did a great analysis of her final messages. It's all in the book in the first chapter. Primack says, note that there's a total absence of any urgency on the part of Earhart. Considering her situation, she should have been glued to her microphone in a continuous attempt to establish two-way communications with Itasca. After the above transmission, there is no further word from Earhart until 40 minutes later. 40 minutes. That's an eternity, writes Primack. What the blazes was she doing for 40 minutes? Okay? So this sets up the final message from Earhart to Itasca at 08:44 Howland time, 20 hours and 14 minutes after departing Leh. Earhart transmits her infamous last message. This is the one that, people see. It's in every book in the world about Earhart, I guess. This is the infamous last messages. We are on the line of position 157, 337. That's a line as you go around. It's 360 in a circle. So they're on that line, 157 through 337. We'll repeat this message. We will repeat this message on 6210 kilocycles. Wait listening on 6210 kilocycles. We are running north and south. That was her last message. She was never officially heard from again after that. Now, that message, to a layman like myself, or probably you, the people that don't understand radio lingo and navigation lingo, I mean, that message makes no sense at all. How do you run north and south at the same time? You know, what does that mean? Was she flying north, or was she flying south, or was she going in circles? How do you go in circles north and south? I don't know. The whole thing is just baffling. Okay, so she was heard, Bill. She was heard by Leo Bellert, who was the chief radio officer on Itasca, at a signal strength of 5 out of 5 when that last message came in. That means that she was fairly close. She had to have been fairly close to the Itasca to be heard so strongly. Leo Bellert told a researcher in 1973 that he ran up to the bridge expecting to see her coming in for a landing. Of course, he didn't.
Right. And I see in your book also, it looks like in 1981, Paul Rafford did a scale model test. Let me read this to the audience so they get a better feel of what we're talking about here. During his 1981 scale model tests of the Electra's transmission capabilities, Paul Rafford Jr. collaborated with Loomis, who wanted to know how far north of Howland Island the Electra could have been when her last message was heard at a signal strength of 5 to 5. And those of you that used to have CB radios like I did, or are into CB radios still, or shortwave, your reception strength goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 being the very best. I mean, you're just pegging the meter at that point. It's a very strong signal. Rafford's computer analysis determined Earhart's last message could have come in full strength, even though the aircraft could have been 150 miles northwest of Howland. And so now we don't, apparently they don't know where she is at all, because she's not transmitting long enough for anybody to get a fix on her. And let me describe just for a second, Mike, how they do that. They the ships back then, and I don't know if they do this now. I mean, I would, because I'm into shortwave radio. But you have basically a loop antenna. It's a directional antenna sort of a thing. And when you hear a signal, you turn that antenna until the signal is at its strongest, and that tells you the direction that the signal is coming from. And she was not on the air long enough for them to rotate their antenna around, because they probably just started rotating around and go, oh, damn it, she's gone again. And then they had to wait for the next time and rotate the antenna a little bit more. Damn it, she's gone again. And that's essentially the way it went. In fact, I have a photograph right here on the screen that I believe, if I read the website correct, this is the actual radio room in the ship Itasca. I don't know if it's during her flight or not, if it was a publicity photo, but that's one of the radio operators right there in front of the radio on the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, which is very interesting. So now we get to the point where she's not anywhere near the island where she's supposed to be. Let me put the course map up on the screen again. And at this point, they begin the search, or was the search initiated after? How long did it take them to start doing the search, Mike?
It didn't take them long for Itasca to initiate the search. There was clouds to the northwest, and the rest of the sky was clear. Therefore, they naturally searched the northwest first. And then they called the Navy at Hawaii. The Navy embarked USS Colorado, the big battleship in those days, the major capital ship. Then the Lexington took a little bit longer to get underway. The USS Lexington, the aircraft carrier, with 63 aircraft on board. They all searched the area. They searched 262,000 square miles around Howland Island, and found nothing, not a trace, not an oil slick, not a splinter. Nothing was found, and the Navy verdict was that she crashed on the water and sank 120 miles to northwest of Howland Island. That was the story. That was the official story about what happened to her, and that's all that the American public heard. And then we had, this is 1937, soon we had Pearl Harbor, and then we had World War II, and then, everything about Amelia Earhart sort of just faded, it just kind of faded into the national consciousness, and into the memory. But in 1960, it all came back alive again. 1960, it came back alive because Paul Briand Jr., who was a English teacher at the Air Force Academy, Captain Paul Briand, was working on a biography of Amelia Earhart when he came into contact with a dentist who had practiced on Saipan named Casimir Shift, a Navy dentist. This Casimir Shift told Briand the story of what Josephine Blanco Akiyama had told him in Saipan in the late 40s about her experiences on Saipan in 1937 as an 11-year-old girl. Now, this book from Paul Briand Jr. was published in 1960, and this book began the modern search for Amelia Earhart. The modern-day search for Amelia Earhart did not begin with Rick Gillespie and TIGAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery. This is probably all your listeners know from the mainstream media all these years, since 1989, when they came back from their first trip to Nicaragua. Okay, the search for Amelia Earhart began in 1960, the real search with Paul Briand's book. Now, maybe I should read the end of that because it's so poignant, and then we can jump ahead to to the meat of this thing, and let people know what's been found since the 1960s. So much research has been done, Bill, since Fred Goerner's book, which we will get to shortly. But anyway, I'm just going to read one or two paragraphs from the end of Paul Briand's book, because this is when it started. This is when it really started. On the way to meet her brother-in-law in the summer of 37, Josephine heard an airplane flying overhead. She looked up and saw a silver two-engine plane. The plane seemed to be in trouble, for it came down low, headed out in the harbor, and belly landed on the water. It was not until she met her brother-in-law that Josephine discovered whom it was that had crash-landed in the harbor. Now, I'm going to stop the quote just for a second. Briand wrote, crash landed. However, since then, we're almost positive that it was not a crash landing, but it was a seaplane landing in the harbor. To an unsophisticated 11-year-old, that could look like a crash landing or a belly landing in the harbor, but it was a seaplane. We're almost positive. It could not have been the Electra. Anyway, back to Briand's book. The American Woman, everyone was saying, greatly excited. Come and see the American Woman. Josephine and her brother-in-law joined a knot of people who gathered to watch. She saw the American Woman standing next to a tall man wearing a short-sleeved sports shirt, and was surprised because the woman was not dressed as a woman usually dressed. Instead of a dress, the American woman wore a man's shirt and trousers, and instead of long hair, she wore a haircut short like a man. The faces of the man and woman were white and drawn as if they were sick. Briand, unquote. That's the end of Briand's account. Briand added that Josephine had identified a photo of Earhart and Noonan as absolutely being that of the same man and woman she saw on Saipan in 1937, as did all the subsequent eyewitnesses that were interviewed by Fred Goerner and others. They were always subjected to photo lineups, and they always picked Amelia Earhart out of those lineups. Now, you notice that Briand did not quote Josephine directly at the end of his book. What he was doing is he was taking the account that Casimir Shift gave him and putting it in the end of his book to sensationalize things, of course, and so he didn't even have time to interview Josephine before that book went to press. But what happened was that Linwood Day, a reporter from the San Mateo Times, saw this, heard about this, and he went and interviewed Josephine Blanco Akiyama in San Mateo, California, where she lived. And he did a series of articles about her and about her experiences on Saipan. And soon Fred Goerner in nearby San Francisco got wind of this. Fred Goerner was a CBS newsman, on KCBS Radio San Francisco. Goerner saw this and immediately jumped on it. Okay, he visited Josephine and her husband Maximo Akiyama, and that started the ball rolling with Goerner's investigations. He went to Saipan within a month of that meeting or of hearing about the articles, of interviewing Josephine, and he was in Saipan in late June 1960 with the first of his 4 investigations on Saipan.
Now the seaplane that we know that little girl saw, and I had her photograph as a older woman on the screen.
We don't have any young ones. We don't have any other photos right now.
Yeah,
we tried to contact her. We tried to get her to talk to us back in about 2005 or so, and she's still alive. She's about 80-some years old.
Wow,
in
that's
San
amazing.
Mateo.
That's amazing.
But she ignored my letter. She's probably sick of it all.
Probably. I mean, can you blame her? Everybody's been asking her about it for all of these years, and she's probably thinking, I already told you guys about this. Now, obviously she mistook a seaplane landing in the harbor as a plane crashing, because she probably didn't know that it was a seaplane. But the question is, at this point in our story about this, where did that seaplane come from? And
well, it could have come from Kwajalein. It could have come from Ponape or Truk as well. Those islands, Kwajalein is 1,500 miles from Saipan. They had that kind of range. It also could have. We know, we have witnesses now in the book. We have witnesses that knew that place her on Kwajalein. So we know without a doubt she was on Kwajalein. Paul Rafford, who you mentioned earlier, knew a witness or knew a man who talked to an old man on Kwajalein who said he saw a white woman and man boarding a land-based plane in 1937. At that time, okay, a land-based plane from Kwajalein. Okay, so we don't know absolutely for certain that the plane that landed in that harbor was a seaplane. We know that it was a Japanese plane, though. We can pretty much say it was a Japanese plane and not her Electra, because her Electra was somewhere else. Okay, we'll just say that for now as we proceed to this narrative.
Right, and let's let me see here. Let me close out a couple of things here on the broadcast. One of the broadcast screens. There we go. We now know, and from reading your book and the accounts in it, I'm going to say for 100% certainty, we know where the Electra finally landed, for want of a better term, crash landed, I suppose. We know exactly where they landed, don't we?
Oh yeah, we certainly do. But I think we should talk about Fred Goerner's witnesses first, because that's where we left off a minute ago, and then we'll proceed logically to the Marshall Islands situation. How's that?
That sounds perfect. Yep, you're the expert on this, and I'm a relative newcomer to. I've heard all these rumors, all of my life, Mike. And starting probably in the late 1960s, probably when I was 10, 11 years old, right after the moon landing. I've read articles here and there and things like that, and I never thought that she had crashed and sunk in the ocean. I always thought that she was alive for some time after the plane went down. I mean, that's what I've always believed.
Your instincts were good, because you couldn't have seen, unless you saw or read Goerner's book or saw something that was halfway truthful, which is almost impossible. The last time anything was presented on network television that even mentioned Saipan was Unsolved Mysteries in 1990. That featured some American GIs, Thomas Devine, Robert Wallach, and others, we will be getting to them, who were allowed to present their stories in 1990. But that program, that was the last time, except for one exception with Connie Chung, that Robert Wallach was allowed to speak. The establishment media absolutely despises the truth in the Earhart matter. This is the whole point of my book. This is what we try to bring out. That there are two major storylines: the evidence for the witnesses, the witnesses and other documents, the evidence of her presence and death on Saipan, her landing in the Marshalls, and the second part of the storyline is the false narrative and the establishment's determination to keep this from the public. They are absolutely still determined to this day that you and I and everyone else be stupid about what happened to Amelia Earhart. And we'll get to the reasons for that as this program unfolds. Okay?
Okay, so let's talk about the eyewitnesses then.
Let's talk about Goerner, Fred Goerner, because Fred Goerner's initial investigations on Saipan were seminal. They were the most important aspects to the search for Amelia Earhart and everything that came later. He set the tone for those that really wanted to find the truth. Now, in July of 1960, June of 1960, Fred Goerner began his first investigation on Saipan. He interviewed 200 eyewitnesses using Roman Catholic priests as translators. They spoke Spanish on Saipan, and Goerner didn't speak that language. He used the priests as translators because, as you mentioned earlier, these people were Catholics, they were God-fearing Catholics, and they would not lie in the presence of a priest. Okay, this is one of the criticisms that the skeptics always throw up, that Goerner's witnesses were lying or they were mistaken in some way. That doesn't fly. Okay, the people that talked to Goerner, the 200 eyewitnesses, or 200 potential witnesses that he interviewed, many of whom were afraid to tell what they knew because they were still afraid of the Japanese. Even to that day in 1960, 16 years after or 15 years after World War II, they were still afraid of the Japanese. But he found what he called his 13 original witnesses. Okay. 13 people who he featured in his book, and he used them in his narrative about what happened. Now, one of the most outstanding of the witnesses, I think, it just gives it all away in one witness, is a guy named Dr. Manuel Aldon. He was a dentist on Saipan in 1937. He worked with Japanese officers. He worked on Japanese officers. Probably wasn't paid much, but he listened and he understood Japanese. He understood what they said. Now I'm going to quote Aldon to Fred Goerner just briefly, so that your listeners can get a flavor for what Manuel Aldon knew about Amelia Earhart. He said, "I dealt with high officials on the island and knew what they were saying in Japanese. The name of the lady I hear used, this is the name the Japanese officer said, Earharto." I don't think there's much doubt about who he meant. Aldon said he had heard much about Earhart from his patients, and in 1937 these were restricted to Japanese officers. The officers made jokes about the United States using women as spies, Aldon told Goerner. They said that American men did not have the courage to come and spy themselves. So that was Manuel Aldon to Fred Goerner. Goerner interviewed, as I said, he had his 13 original eyewitnesses. Most of them actually saw her. Some, as Aldon did, was told about her by the Japanese. But the striking thing, of course, is the name was actually pronounced. Most of the people that heard about Amelia Earhart on Saipan did not hear her name being used. They just didn't use it. But the officers, when they were with Aldon in probably a more intimate situation where he was actually working on them, opened up a little bit more and gave him that information. Okay, so in 1960, July 1, 1960, okay, now as a result of Goerner's findings on Saipan, Linwood Day of the San Mateo Times wrote an article that was headlined in 100-point headlines, a huge headline on the front page of the San Mateo Times, July 1st, 1960. The headline reads, "Amelia Earhart mystery is solved," and underneath it, the story is headlined, "Famed aviatrix died on Saipan." That was in 1960, the San Mateo Times. I can tell you that story was not picked up by the Washington Post, by the New York Times, or by anybody else that I can find. But that story was true in 1960, and it's just as true today. The government doesn't want the American people to know it, and it's been working diligently since 1966, when Goerner's book was published, The Search for Amelia Earhart. That was the book that really alerted the American people to the truth. Now, there's a lot of people that are like over 70 or 80 years old that remember that book that might have even bought it. Goerner's book in 1966 established without a doubt for any objective observer that Amelia Earhart had been on Saipan, along with Noonan, her navigator. Soon after the book was published, Bill, in 1966, Time magazine came out with a scathing review of the book, ripped it to shreds, and said it was basically BS. This was Time magazine inveighing and passing on the establishment and the powers that be viewpoint on the Earhart matter to the American people. From that point on, Saipan and Earhart were rarely ever seen together in the same sentence, and when they were, it was to deprecate the idea. Even today, Wikipedia, in their Earhart entry, has at the very bottom urban legends and myths about Saipan. That's how they classify the truth about Amelia Earhart's death on Saipan. It's an urban legend and a myth that's unsupported by American history teachers or American historians. I wonder which historians these are that don't support it. Could they be the government-approved variety, Bill?
Probably. Deep breath. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath there.
I can really get the. I mean, this has been going on. Basically since 1966 when the word came out. Well, like as I said, the Washington Post. None of the big newspapers ran with Goerner stuff. It became so well known, though, that among those that were paying attention, that later I have found certain evidence that some of Goerner's work was being reported, but it was only in a very negative light. It was never a positive spin on anything Goerner ever did.
Yeah, we're looking for you folks that are watching on the video stream or watching this on the YouTube archive that's going to be up later. We are looking at a photograph of Goerner with Aldan right here. That is the eyewitness that he interviewed. And as I said in my monologue, Mike, and I think it really bears to say it again. The islanders out there, they take their Catholic faith very seriously, and they would not dream of lying to a Catholic priest for fear of going to hell when they die.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. They take their faith far more seriously than we do here in the United States, and it's and to me, Mike, that right there says an awful lot of the veracity of these witnesses that these people interviewed.
Oh, absolutely. They were simple people, too. And they had no axe to grind. They had no agenda or anything else. I mean, they were just, they barely knew of radio's existence in those days. Some of them probably didn't. I mean, I'm sure there was no, I don't know. I'm not certain if there was no radios on Saipan in 1937, but they were very few and far between if there were. And the only thing that they were hearing on their radios was Japanese propaganda, because the Japanese owned that island since 1920. The League of Nations mandate, and the Japanese put the Saipanese to work for them right away as soon as they got there, and they were living under the yoke of the Japanese on Saipan.
And it bears mentioning that the Japanese were building their war machine at that time since the late 1930s.
Absolutely, they had actually begun earlier than that. We have been. That discussion has, with different researchers, we've always, we're trying to always nail that down. When they started building this, when they started building that, there's a lot of apologists for the Japanese that say that they didn't start any sort of a military buildup until after 1941, which is absolutely false, and we found that to be the case, and so did Goerner. They began that airfield in the early 1930s. They had built their seaplane base by 1933. However, the seaplane base and the airfield were both, they both could have been used for civilian purposes, according to the Japanese, and that's true. But the way that they approached the buildup on Saipan and the way they approached those things were not for any civilian capacities, and the way they explained it later was also not in a civilian capacity way. They knew that sooner or later that island was going to come into play, during the war. So, they were starting to do things. We also have a piece of an incredible piece of evidence, a letter from a woman to a Navy commander in New York City. This woman was a resident of Guam, and she was on Saipan in as early as 1930. I think it was 1933. And she was visiting Saipan from Guam. I don't have the letter in front of me. It just bounced into my head. But she was being followed by the Japanese military on Saipan as a stranger. She was an American woman living on Guam, and she said that during that time on Saipan, the Japanese ships and planes were undergoing military maneuvers. And this was in 1933. Okay, so these critics that say the Japanese had no plans for Saipan, they weren't using it as a military base, and there was no military personnel on Saipan until after 1941, is absolute rubbish. Absolutely not true. And I go into great lengths in my in the last chapter of Amelia Earhart, The Truth at Last, to look at all of these different claims, not all the claims, but some of the more prominent false claims that have been made about Saipan and the Japanese, to sort of apologize or to deflect criticism away from them. But we expose all of it as being false.
Yeah, and let's jump into some of those theories that people have currently about Amelia Earhart and where the Electra landed or ended up. Tell us about the various other quote-unquote theories that people have about where the Electra finally ended up.
Okay, I guess we need to do that.
That'd be a really good thing to do at this point.
Well, your listeners probably most of what your listeners have heard for the last 25 years, 99.9% of it is about TIGAR. That is the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery. Now, they have been the establishment's selected disinformation or propaganda outlet since 1989, when they came back from Nicaragua, their first trip to Nicaragua. This idea that now they've been back 10 times since 1989 and trying to get the money to go back again the 11th time. Now, this idea that Amelia Earhart landed on Nicaragua Atoll in 1937 is not new with Gillespie. He didn't make it up. He didn't invent it. He just took it third hand and made it work with the help of a very compliant media. The idea that she landed in the Phoenix Islands, that's where Goerner Island is. Goerner was later called Nicaragua. That idea was basically conceived by the great inventor Fred Hooven in the 1970s, and he expressed it in a paper that's still on file at the Smithsonian Institute called Amelia Earhart's Last Flight. And Hooven said the evidence strongly supports the hypothesis that's presented that in his paper that the flyers landed in the Phoenix area, probably on McCain or Gardner, that they transmitted signals from there during the next 3 days, that they were removed by the Japanese, who either removed or destroyed their plane, that they were then taken to Saipan, where they died sometime before the end of 1937. I just pulled that out of Hooven's paper. Now, this is what Hooven believed for a brief time. And shortly after his paper, though, was published in 1982, he changed his mind completely about that, and for many good reasons. Fred Goerner talked to her, worked very closely with Hooven. I have a whole file of letters between the two. Now, Goerner and Hooven talked about Phoenix Island, or Gardner Island a lot, and I think it was Goerner that finally talked Hooven out of the idea, because there was absolutely no evidence that they had ever been there. First of all, we have Henry Maude of the British Colonial Service, who went to Nicomoraro. I'm sorry, he isn't first, he's second, but we'll go back to who was first there. Henry Maude visited the island 100 days after she was lost. He walked around the island for a week, staking it out, doing a survey for Gilbert T. settlers that were coming soon thereafter. 5 days, or I think 5 days after she was lost, or so, maybe a week, the battleship Colorado launched 3 planes from her deck, and they overflew the Phoenix Islands, including Nicomoraro and Gardner Island. Sorry, in those days it was Gardner Island. They saw nothing either, not anything at all. There was no trace of Earhart or Noonan. After Maude was there 100 days after she was lost, we have Gilbert T. settlers living there on Gardner Island between 1940 and 1964, okay? Up to 100 at a time, Gilbert T. settlers lived there. Then in 1944, 1945, we have a U.S. Navy Loran Coast Guard station, a radar station on Gardner Island. So we have all these people that lived on Gardner Island all these years. And so Gillespie goes back and he digs and he finds garbage. He takes the garbage and he tries to tell us that the garbage is connected to Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan being on Nicomoraro. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. And it would never wash past 1 or 2 trips to Nicomoraro unless the establishment media wanted it to be understood or known or propagated that this is what happened to her. And he should be finding something very shortly that will tie all this up and will solve the mystery forever. So I've been watching this now, Bill, for 25 years, and it's just disgusting the way every other year it's the same song and dance. And he, like last summer, he was photographed with Hillary Clinton before his 10th trip back to the island, and Hillary Clinton was giving her seal of appeal or of approval to Gillespie's Voyage of Deceit. Now, I don't know, I can't think of anybody with less credibility to give their seal of approval to anything than Hillary Clinton. But there was Gillespie and Hillary Clinton, all smiles as he takes off with other people's money to do another investigation on Nicomoraro. Gillespie has a 501(c) nonprofit organization that he makes a living from. So he's been making a living from this for 25 years. So he's heavily invested in it, as is the media. Before Gillespie came along, we had Elgin Long. Elgin Long was the Navy poster boy for the verdict that came down from the U.S. government as to what happened. The crash and sank 120 miles northwest of Howland. His story started to run thin after all those years, and he wrote a book about it called Amelia Earhart, The Mystery Solved. Hardly.
Apparently not.
You talk about a misnamed book. Elgin Long was, he was the first one. He was the Navy apologist, but they had to come up with something else after that. After a long story just didn't fly anymore, so they came up with this ridiculous thing with Gillespie, and it continues, and it's all anybody hears in the media. Just the other day, I wrote to a BBC writer who had published in late June of this summer another story about Gillespie. Of course, all he has to do is utter a sentence or two, and the mainstream media, even the British media, tout it as, can this be the answer to the Earhart mystery? Is this finally the answer? And they never even mention Saipan. They never even mention any other ideas. It's as if Rick Gillespie is the only person in the world with any ideas about what happened to Amelia Earhart. Everybody else in the world is stupid, completely stupid, and nobody has any ideas. He's the world-renowned expert, and he's going to solve it. It's just outrageous. I think you get the idea.
I believe I do, and I believe the audience does too. I have on the screen Gardner Island circled, and you can see how far away it is from the actual course that we believe that she took, I mean, it's essentially in the opposite direction of where the plane actually wound up. I mean, it boggles my mind.
Right. Now, this is, they use, they use the last message, the 157, 337 message, as another excuse to point to Howland, because if you use that, if you take that line of position and you put it on Howland, it points down in the Phoenix Islands. They use this as, she must have flown down south along this line of position. The thing is that they wouldn't have reached Goerner if they did that. They would have reached McCain. McCain was a much bigger island than Goerner was. So there was radio signals that were allegedly coming from that area as well during the Navy search that were reported back in this country. We have hundreds of alleged radio receptions from Earhart. That's a whole other topic, a whole other issue, whether or not those signals were legitimately from her or not. And there's no way they could have all been, of course not. But some may have been. However, personally, and from the evidence that I've seen, it's impossible to know for sure. It's just impossible to know. However, if she did make the wheels up landing, that all the evidence that the best evidence that we have of her landing at Millie Atoll, okay, which is 800 miles northwest of Howland Island, that's where she landed. Okay, now, if that evidence is correct, and I believe it is, she landed wheels up in the lagoon at Millie. Now, if that was the case, she could not have been broadcasting for longer than a few minutes from that atoll. She needed the propellers to turn, and she needed full power to be able to broadcast with her radio. And even with her radio, she wouldn't have been heard back in this country. There's no way. Paul Raffer did extensive studies on that. So these signals that allegedly came from Amelia Earhart, that's another thing that they like to cite at Tigar, are surely bogus. Surely bogus. I mean, there's no end to the stories that they come up with. But I think that at this point, after we've been talking about this for an hour, that we should tell the audience. Basically, I think we should, just take a breath and just let the audience know, in a nutshell, what happened, and then we'll just proceed from there, so that people aren't confused. Because we covered Saipan, but chronologically, I mean, this is what happened, Bill. What happened was she landed at Millie Atoll. Okay, she landed near Berry Island at Millie Atoll. All the evidence tells us this. From there, she was picked up by the Japanese, probably within a day, because the Japanese followed her flight. They were very, very sophisticated with their radio, their high frequency direction finding radio. They knew where she was. They knew where she went down. They came and picked her up in the Millie Atoll about a day, or about a day probably after she landed there, possibly sooner. We have the witness accounts. They don't know exactly what day it was, because these are unsophisticated islanders. We will get to the Millie accounts in a minute. But okay, so she landed there. She was picked up by the Japanese, probably by a fishing boat. We have evidence of that. Taken to the Japanese seaplane tender or survey ship called the Koshu. From the Koshu took her to Jalawit, which was the Japanese headquarters in the Marshall Islands. From Jalawit, she was taken to Kwajalein. Okay, from Kwajalein, she was flown either to Truk or Ponape and then Saipan, or she could have been flown directly to Saipan from Kwajalein. Okay, now on Saipan, that's where her life ended. Her and Noonan both died on Saipan in Japanese captivity. We have no doubt whatsoever of that fact.
Let me, while we're talking about that, I want to make sure that I show this during the show. There is a website. It's called Saipan Pictures. I'm not sure if that's the name of the website or not. Mike sent this to me the other day. These are photographs of the actual jail on Saipan. that the Japanese used. Let me scroll through these, and you can see the various photographs of the ruins of the jail, what the inside of one of the cells looked like, the main cell block here on the screen, and other various outdoor photographs of the cell blocks. And here you have the building that they did the torturing in. And you can see on this wall there's some blasts from a tank that was an American tank during the Pacific D-Day. And those are the some of the images of on Saipan Island. You can just do a search for Saipan pictures on the internet. So let's pick up where you just left off, Mike, and continue with the story of what actually happened to Amelia Earhart.
Okay, well, I think now that we've kind of laid it all out in very plain terms, bottom line stuff, we can go to the Marshall Islands witnesses and look at a few of them. The most outstanding one. You have a picture there of Bilamon Amaran, I'm sure.
Yes, I do. He is coming up on the screen right now. There he is. A very young-looking.
Now, this Bilamon Amaran, the picture that you're seeing, or that your viewers, the ones that are viewing that, that was Bilamon Amaran in 1989. He was in his early 60s. Very young-looking for his age.
Yes.
He was in, and the person with him is John Primack. That's Bill Primack's son. That picture, as I said, was taken in 1989. Bilamon Amaran had told his story to several researchers, including Fred Goerner, before Bill Primack got there in 1989. But I am going to quote from his account to Bill Primack. Bilamon Amaran was a 16-year-old Japanese hospital corpsman on Jalawit in 1937. Okay, he was called out to a Japanese Navy tender ship, the Koshu, we believe, to treat an American flyer's wounds. Now, I'm getting ready to quote from Bilamon's account to Bill Primack. Here we go. Bilamon tells Bill Primack, in July 1937, I was residing on Jalawit, site of major Japanese naval base, working as 16-year-old medical corpsman for Naval Hospital. One day at mid-morning, Japanese Navy tender ship comes to harbor, and the chief naval doctor takes me on board the ship. Crew and officers were in naval uniforms. Sitting in deck chair was American woman, and sitting on hatch cover was thin American man with wounds. Japanese doctor determined that American man's wounds were not too serious, so he let me tend wounds. Lady looked to be in good health and need no treatment. Americans seemed not to be held prisoners, and crew was in total awe that woman would fly airplane, unheard of in Japan. I speak no English, so could not talk to Americans. Japanese officer tell me that Americans fly airplane from Ley, New Guinea, try to reach Howland Island, get lost, fly into big storm, try to make Gilbert Islands, get blown away, and land in water in Millie. Ship find them with plane in water and rescue them. Japanese officer then take me rear a ship. Japanese officer then, and show me their airplane. Silver, 2 motors with left wing broken. Airplane still in sling on back of ship. I know Japanese airplanes. This airplane was new to me, not Japanese. This airplane on back of ship was very shiny like silver. Propellers had only 2 blades. Crew called lady, Melia. There's your money quote right there. A Japanese crew calling the American woman on board the Koshu, Melia. She dressed in dark shirt, white blouse, and kerchief around neck. Okay, now, she probably had time to change before she arrived in Jalawit and saw Bilamon Amaran. She did not leave Ley in a dark skirt, white blouse, and kerchief, but that's a troubling detail. But with eyewitnesses accounts, the details, are always going to vary somewhat, But Bilamon Amaran told basically the same story to American researchers since 1975, when he first told Fred Goerner.
Now, Mike, it sounds to me from his eyewitness account, it sounds to me like almost, he said it didn't look like they were prisoners. Did the Japanese originally think they were rescuing them and then later called them spies?
That's hard to say.
Because that's what it almost sounds like.
They had them on the ship, And so they weren't going anywhere. And there was no reason for them at that time to put him in handcuffs or to chain him up anywhere. I don't think so. This is all just, this was Bill Montemaron's observation. The man was injured to begin with. He was a threat to no one, and she was a female. So I think that the Japanese thought that they had them pretty much under control anyway, And from the point where Bill Montemaron took care of Hooven of Noonan, they were taken to Jalowit, and we have evidence that they were seen in jail in the jail on Jalowit, which we don't talk about much in the book. That is a very complicated story, and but we do have evidence they were on Jalowit. There's no question about it. Now, I'm wondering whether we should talk some more about Billamont's account. It was corroborated by a guy named John Heine. He was a lawyer, a school principal, and minister of the local Christian church on Majuro. He told Majuro is the capital of the Marshall Islands. He told an investigator named T.C. Buddy Brennan in '83 he had just entered the Japanese high school at Amidge, which was the Japanese seaplane base on Jalowit in 1937. So John Heine was on Jalowit in 1937. He says him and his schoolmates were ordered to go down to the harbor and wave little Japanese flags as a ship came into the harbor. Heine couldn't recall the name of the ship, but said it was towing a barge. On the barge was an airplane. It was partially covered, but I could tell it was silver-colored. It was smaller than and did not resemble the Japanese seaplanes we were familiar with. The plane had two propellers, Heine said, but we couldn't see the tail. Okay, now this... this can be written off. However, this was the Electra that Heine saw, okay? And a better piece of corroborating evidence for the Electra on the back of the ship was collected by Bill Primack himself when he went to Inajet Atoll or Inajet Island on Millie in 1937. Or in 1989, and interviewed. I'm looking for it now. I'm jumping ahead because I can see the time is flying.
We were talking,
Bill Primack,
folks, before the show.
You have the photo of Primack.
Yes,
Primack with Joro. Now, this Joro was a very important witness. Thank you to Bill Primack for his great work. Now, in 1989. Primack met Joro. He was a village elder born about 1915, so that would have made him about 74. One of the several on Inajet with knowledge of the American woman's 1937 landing near Berry Island. Now, during the second week in July 1937, now this is what Joro's telling Primack, an American woman with a lady pilot crash-landed on the inner coral reefs of Berry Island. I was on my way to Millie Island to secure the services of a midwife nurse for my wife, who was expecting our firstborn child, at Inajet, when orders came out from the garrison commander on Millie for all able-bodied men to assemble in the village of Port Rhin at Tokoo Channel next to Berry Island. Millie, Inajet, Alu, and Garu Islands were tapped for their manpower, and men were told to bring their sleeping mats. 5 from Inajet were sent. I was excused, and 2 that went to Berry Island still live in the village. This is what much I was told, Joro continued. A naval ship towing a barge arrived from Jalowit, and a local Japanese patrol boat went out to deep water where the naval vessel anchored and brought the barge into position next to an American airplane that had belly landed on the shallow water off Berry Island. It took the efforts of some 40 men with winches to get the airplane onto the barge. For many years, the local men talked about the great skill and ingenuity of the Japanese when they were able to sink one end of the steel barge to water level and winch the airplane on. The Japanese were very strict about secrecy of the mission and threatened all natives with death by beheading if they ever spoke of the event. We natives harbored great fear of Japanese brutality, and this fear lingered well into after the Great War ended. Joro was told the American man was injured and had a bandage wrapped around his head, echoing Bilamon Amaron's account, and learned the flowers were kept in the local village of Port Rhin and were later taken to Jalowit. So he goes on there, but I mean, there you have a second-hand account for sure. Joro was not one of the ones that actually was there winching the Electra aboard the the Koshu. However, there were two people on the island that were actual eyewitnesses that Primack was forbidden to talk to because he dived on an aircraft there on Inajet Island that he was told not to go near. And when they found out about it, it was like their sacred grounds or something. When they found out about it, they punished Primack by not letting him talk to the two eyewitnesses to the winching of the Electra aboard the Koshu. And Primack said, a broken promise on my part that has come to haunt me for the rest of my life. Could you imagine? Primack went all the way over there, and he had these, Jorah was a good witness, yes, but he was still telling someone else's story. And Primack had two first-hand eyewitnesses that got away from him because he disregarded the villagers' instructions not to dive on an airplane.
Yeah, bad decisions. It's just I imagine he just kicked himself for the rest of his life over that.
Absolutely.
So let's, in the time that we have left, we've established that the plane crash landed at Amelia Island, or Amelia Atoll.
Amelia Atoll,
and
off of Berry Island. See, an atoll is a circle of islands in the Pacific with a lagoon in the middle. That's where an atoll is. So there's many different islands that make up an atoll. Inajet was one in the. If you could find a map I sent you, you might be able to put it up.
It's been on the screen for a while now.
Oh, okay, good. Then you see Berry Island at the top.
Yep.
Of the map. That was handwritten in there by someone, and I'm not sure if Inajet is easy to see, but it's farther away from Millie. It's down toward the northwest, the southeast, I believe. But in those days, they got around. They knew how to, they traveled around the atoll pretty easy. They had boats, outriggers or whatever. There's
Inajet right there that I have circled. Somebody also scrawled in here that they found there's a B-25 that crashed. Let me circle that right there. There's a B-25 that crashed on the southern side of the atoll. And
that might have been the one. That might have been the one that Primack dove on. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So we've established. Folks, you have to read this book. It is really a yeoman's work on the history of this, and I mean, Mike is just barely skimming the surface of what's in the book. I mean, this will take you days to read. When I do a show, I owe it to the authors to read the book, so I go through the books kind of quickly. But I do retain a lot of what was in there, and it's an amazing book, Mike. You did a excellent job. And I think what we should do...
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, we only got about 40 minutes left, and I think the most important...
Well, we haven't talked at all about the GIs yet.
That is exactly that's exactly where I was going. Why don't we finish up with the GIs and, folks, their eyewitness accounts after they got to Saipan during the... what they call the Pacific D-Day, which was an amazing operation just to read about that without bringing the Amelia Earhart stuff into it. But I'm going to let Mike take it away from there.
Well, the Battle of Saipan was the most important battle in the Pacific up until then. D-Day in the European theater, of course, at Normandy, June 6, 1944, was always gets all the attention whenever we do the commemoratives of World War II. But just as big in the Pacific War was the battle for Saipan, because once we got Saipan, it was just a short hop to Japan with our bombers to begin to attack the Japanese mainland with our air power. So the Saipan was the key battle in the Pacific War leading up to the end of the war, but it unlocked the Pacific to America in June and July of 1944. We have I had to cut about 20 pages of my account of the Saipan battle out of the book because it just became too much of a distraction from the main event. But we lost almost 15,000 men killed on Saipan to take that island, and we wiped out their garrison of 30,000. They had 30,000 Japanese soldiers on Saipan, and almost all of them were wiped out, except the very few that surrendered because they didn't believe in surrendering. They fought to the death or killed themselves.
Yeah.
Anyway,
on the screen right now, folks, I've got a photograph of the actual Battle of Saipan. You can see in the center background, you can see one of the big battleships firing off its big guns. You can see Saipan in the background. It just goes all the way across the photo. And literally thousands and thousands of landing craft heading towards the shore. They're, right there in the middle of the screen. It's an amazing sight to behold. Even an old grainy black and white photograph, I could not imagine Mike partaking in something like that. That is
really, yeah.
It is. It's awe-inspiring. It's really chilling when you think about it. It's
not for the faint-hearted.
I could not. Honestly, I could not do that. I just can't picture myself even as a young guy doing that. But I mean, that's what people had to do during World War II.
It was a different world, a completely different world.
It was.
There was no PC. It was life and death. It was us or them. It was as simple as that. There was no, politics. The politics were long gone. We did everything we could politically to stay out of the war with Japan. But FDR that's another story. He was determined that we get into the war with Japan. Anyway, we're going to leave that to the end because we get into the explanations about why all this happened.
Right.
But first, let's talk about the eyewitnesses on Saipan, the American GI eyewitnesses. We start with Thomas E. Devine.
He's on the screen right now.
When I first
folks.
got involved, what?
He's on the screen right now. I have his picture on Saipan.
Now, Thomas E. Devine was a sergeant in the 244th Army Postal Unit on Saipan. Thomas E. Devine was second in command of his unit. He came onto the island of Saipan July 6, 1944. That was almost most of the fighting was already over by the time he came onto the island of Saipan. June 15th was D-Day on Saipan. But Devine was not one of the major people that came on and did the fighting. He was a postal sergeant. They wanted to save him. He had important work to do otherwise, administratively. Okay? Now, he came on to Saipan July 6, as we said, just a few days before the island was declared secure. Devine was ordered by his commanding officer, Lieutenant Fritz Liebig, to take him to Oslido Airfield, to the administration building on Oslido, to do for some errand. Devine drove Liebig. Now, as they arrived, they were told to go around and take a detour. That this area was closed off. They had to take a different way to get to the administration building. Devine said once they got there, he was told by a Marine that the Earhart plane had been found in a hangar and it was in a hangar nearby. Later on that day, Devine saw the plane in flight over Saipan. This is one of the hardest things to believe of all, that he actually saw the Earhart plane on Saipan in flight. NR 16020, he said he saw the international registration number on the wings. Now, he saw the plane after that come in for a landing at Oslido Airfield, which was a Japanese airfield that we took over when we took over the island from the Japanese. Later that day, Devine actually went to where the plane was being kept outside the hangar, inspected the plane, and was absolutely certain that it was Amelia Earhart's airplane at that point. And then later on that night, he came back. He heard an explosion in that area, went back, which was not far from where they were bivouacked. He went back to the area and saw the same plane in flames, completely destroyed, burned up, as much as you can burn an aluminum plane and destroy it. It was. And so this is what Devine experienced. Others saw it as well. We can only talk about one person at a time here. But Devine is so notable because he came home with that story. He was asked, when he left Saipan, he was asked to take a separate flight to Hawaii by a naval officer by someone he thought was a naval officer but did not have any insignia on, most likely an ONI agent, Office of Naval Intelligence agent, asked Devine to get on a plane for Hawaii, and he wouldn't tell him why. And Devine was very disturbed by all this and refused to go. He thinks that if he would have gone, he might never have returned to the States. Wow. Anyway, Devine brought all this home with him, and in 1987 published his classic work next to Fred Goerner's book, The Search for Amelia Earhart. This was probably the second most important book ever written. Eyewitness the Amelia Earhart incident in 1987 about Devine. Devine gives his own personal story. Now, at the end of the book, Devine asks for help from any of the GIs that were on Saipan to come forward and tell their accounts, to tell their stories, so that his story will stand up even better. Devine thought that once his book was published and he got help from his GI friends, that this would break it open. This would break open the Earhart matter. He was so disappointed, and he was so it was such a blow to him that this didn't happen at all. I mean, the establishment was determined that information would never get out. So one of the first people that contacted Devine was Robert Wallach, whose photo you have, Wallach on Guam. Robert Wallach was a private with the 29th Marines, 2nd Marine Division on Saipan. Robert Wallach was in the second wave of the invasion. He saw his fellow Marines in the first wave they were almost completely wiped out during the invasion on the beach. When they hit the beach, the Japanese machine gun emplacements and all that just cut them to pieces. You know, you hear about the same thing happening at Normandy. Well, it happened on Saipan as well. And Wallach, thankfully survived. He was in the second wave. He was an 18-year-old private first class. He was a machine gunner, and he, along with a few of his mates, after the island was secured, after Saipan was secured, found a safe in Garapan, in an administration building on Garapan. They found a safe, and in the safe was Amelia Earhart's briefcase with all her papers, her photos, her international passports, her visas, maps, you name it, everything that was necessary for her to do her thing and go around the world administratively was in that briefcase that Robert Wallach found after they blew the safe in Garapan on Saipan. Naturally, of course, this was big news. Many people heard about it, and one of the people that heard about it contacted Devine, as did Wallach right away. As soon as Wallach heard about Devine's book, he contacted him, and I had developed a very good relationship with Robert Wallach for several years. He died a few years ago. Devine died in 2003. But Robert Wallach was very media-friendly, and he told everybody that he could his story about finding Amelia Earhart's briefcase. Eventually, he was pressured to give the briefcase to a naval officer that he found on the beach. And that briefcase went down a black hole that it's never been seen again, of course. It was obviously given to naval intelligence and taken back to the United States and never seen again, along with a lot of other evidence, such as all the photos that were found, Bill.
Yeah, so tell us about the photos. I thought the photos in the book, your telling of the photos is stunning evidence, just absolutely stunning evidence. Tell the listeners and the viewers about the photographs that they found.
Well, I don't have a whole lot of it right in front of me. I'll just do it by rote. But several GIs contacted first Fred Goerner, a few guys. A guy named Alex Rico contacted Fred Goerner about finding a photograph of Amelia Earhart on Saipan with it didn't say Amelia Earhart on Saipan. It was Amelia Earhart with a Japanese officer in a setting that would suggest Saipan. Where else would she have been with a Japanese officer than Saipan? And then several others contacted Devine as well and reported that they had found photos of Amelia Earhart with various Japanese officers, as well as Fred Noonan. A guy named Joe Garofalo, I had a couple great conversations with. He found such a photo on a dead Japanese officer on Saipan after all the fighting was after the island was secured. Garofalo said he was a scavenger, and he used to scavenge dead Japanese officers for cigarettes and things. And he found this photo. Several others found photos, but all these photos that were found disappeared. They were either destroyed or they just disappeared, and we don't have any that have surfaced that we can point to and say, look, this is Amelia Earhart on Saipan. It's so frustrating. One veteran told Devine that he had such a photo in his attic, and that Devine offered him $10,000 for the photo, and the guy couldn't produce it. He looked for the photo and he couldn't find it. Then the guy got sick. He was in the hospital, and this kind of frustration. It's just maddening. Those photos, most of the photos that were found, were scoffed up quickly by naval intelligence on Saipan, because the word went out quickly when the plane was discovered on Saipan that this is not to be known. This is to be covered up. This is to be squelched. So all the evidence was taken, and the plane was destroyed. Now, in that vein, we have another extremely important eyewitness, Erskine Neighbors, a Marine private first class of Baldwin, Mississippi. He was in the 8th Marine Regiment, 2nd Marine Division, I believe. Might have been the 4th, I'm not sure. There was two major Marine divisions on Saipan, the 2nd and the 4th. Neighbors was a 20-year-old code clerk, okay, and in the H&S communication platoon on Saipan. He took secret messages. He decoded the messages on the radio at the the communications platoon there on Saipan. Now, I'm going to quote just a little bit from what Neighbors told Devine in a letter. Okay, here's Erskine Neighbors to Devine in 1993, approximately, in his letter. He says the communications platoon consisted of a wire section, radio section, and a message section. We were on mopping up duty on opposite end of Saipan where we landed. The message came over our field radios. I decoded it and was quite excited when I read the message. The message read that Amelia Earhart's plane had been found at Lido Field. This was about the middle of the morning, Neighbors continued. After I went back to my platoon, there was another message come through that said something about destroying the plane. Myself and two more boys went back down to the airfield to see it destroyed. The message gave the time it was supposed to be destroyed. I'm just reading from Neighbors' letter. I shouldn't have read that. That's just confusing. He went back and saw the plane destroyed after taking the message that it had been found. Now, this from Erskine Neighbors is an amazing piece of information, an incredible eyewitness account. And he also saw the Wallach briefcase at one point after it had been turned into the naval officer. He saw the naval officer give it to a Marine intelligence individual. I forgot to mention that earlier, but he did say he saw the briefcase at one point quickly being exchanged to Marine intelligence on Saipan. Neighbors was not, he died in 2006, I believe, but he wasn't finished with his account in 1993 to Devine. Neighbors was involved with an incredible series of events from a witness, a 10-year-old boy who in 1937 heard in 1960 tell his uncle tell his father about being sent to Saipan as an intelligence agent to make sure that the evidence was destroyed. And this is a whole separate thread. This is a whole separate chapter about Neighbors and the information that he got from this witness via photograph. He's actually ID'd the person that he saw on Saipan approached the hangar where he was guarding the plane, because Neighbors was also assigned was one of the Marines that was assigned to guard the airplane in the hangar, and he saw this group of people that he took to be naval people that they didn't have any insignia on. This is how agents dressed in those days, intelligence agents. They wore naval khakis and marine khakis, but they didn't wear the insignia. And he actually ID'd one of these people, and we actually got a name out of it. His name was James Nichols, and he was involved with the destruction of the airplane on Saipan. So, I mean, it just goes on and on. There's so many different threads. Now, if anybody's been following this from the start, they're going to say, why? Why was the plane destroyed? Why did they want to get rid of all the evidence? You would think that somebody, that we would have been happy to find that plane. We could tell the American people what happened, and then the Amelia Earhart mystery might have been cleared up. Well, the answer is very obvious why we didn't tell the American people what happened to Amelia Earhart on Saipan. When she was taken by the Japanese in 1937, July, we had knowledge of that. We had broken their codes. We heard their chatter on the radios. We knew that they had her, and we could not give away that information. If we would have let them know that we had let the American people know that they had her, we would have been giving away the information that we also had broken the Japanese codes. But more importantly than even that was the fact that since they couldn't do it, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, had to let her linger on Saipan without lifting a finger. We were not ready to go to war with the Japanese in 1937. We were not ready to face off with them. Now, I'm being a bit of an apologist for FDR here, and there's nothing to apologize for, and he is still the culprit in all this. He should have made it internationally known as soon as we knew about it that they had her. They would have been face down, and they would have given her up, but he didn't. He let her linger there, and he let her die there. Now, that's the reason that in 1944 we were so enthusiastic about getting rid of the evidence of her ever being there, burning her plane, burying it in rubble under Saipan's Eslido airfield with hundreds of tons of metal from other Japanese planes. That's why all this talk about finding her airplane anywhere else is complete nonsense. It will never be found because it's unrecognizable. It's scrap junk under that airfield. It's never going to be found.
You guys know.
So that's the reason. That's the major reason. Politics. And I've been told by establishment types that we would let that the Japanese government and our government would have let us know that by now. It happened so long ago. It happened too long ago. They would have come clean if that was the case. That's BS. That's complete BS. That information is still highly sensitive, and it's still being protected. The relationship to Pearl Harbor and her disappearance is also completely unknown. But we know there has to be something. Fred Goerner addressed a group of lawmakers in 1966 in Miami and said there is a direct relationship between our knowledge of her going lost in 1937 and Pearl Harbor. And he intimated that it was about the codes and it was about FDR trying to get the Japanese, manipulating the Japanese into World War II, because we had to have a reason to get in there. We were an isolationist nation at the time. We had to have something. This is a very heavy ball of wax, very heavy. They don't want to. The establishment does not want to have to rewrite their history books about this. It would be a complete overhaul, and it would completely tarnish the image of the Democrat icon of FDR, who is still the icon of the Democrat Party. He and JFK are still the icons of the Democrat Party. So that there is still very much so an active cover-up going on to suppress this information. Thus, my book has been completely blacked out from the start. Nobody will even pay. They won't even recognize its existence in the mainstream. Not one. I mean, all we would need is 5 minutes with Mark Levin or Rush Limbaugh or any of these people that are in the mainstream and would have a bestseller. 5 minutes would be all it would take, and millions of Americans would then know. But no, not even these people that you think that you can trust will touch this story with a 10-foot pole, Bill.
I mean, that right there, folks, when I told you at the beginning of the show during my monologue that this is one of the key pieces of the puzzle that we need, this is why. Wait, he just told you this is why it's one of the key pieces in the puzzle that we need to show us what in the hell our government is up to. And that's I firmly believe that after reading this book, Mike. I really do. This is
sure.
Just that part alone. If we had broken those codes back in 1937 and knew she was being held in Saipan, I mean, forget the point that we let an American citizen, a private American citizen, die at the hands of the Japanese on Saipan. The fact that if that's true, that we had their codes before Pearl Harbor, that is one of the biggest bombshells of the 20th century, the 21st century. Think of how different our history would be if people had known.
That's right. Now, here's the thing. Now, even if, best case scenario, in the way some people might look at it, if we did not have the codes and we did not know about them having her, best case, which I highly doubt. I mean, I think it's 99.9. I mean, really, that they knew, that we knew that they had her before or shortly after she went missing. Okay, I think that's almost certain. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we didn't know they had her in 1937 when she went missing. We knew in 1944, June, when we invaded Saipan, that they had her. At the very latest, we knew that they had her, okay? We absolutely knew then because we have all these eyewitnesses that say so. And we also have an eyewitness who was in the Oval Office in July 1944 who heard FDR issue the destruct order on the Earhart plane. This guy... David Finlayson was his name. He's dead now. He was from the Baltimore area. He contacted Henry Duda in response to a notice that Duda put in a marine magazine called Leatherneck, I believe, was the marine magazine, asking for more eyewitnesses, more help in corroboration of Divine's story. And this David Finlayson told him that he was in the Oval Office working as some kind of a page or messenger at the time. So we have that. He actually heard FDR utter the order with Vice President Henry Wallace was in the room, and so was Truman, the future president, were in the room. He was a senator at the time. This is incredible stuff. That we have a witness like that. I contacted his family after I got this during my investigation, and I actually had an email conversation with some key a witness of someone who was very close to Finlayson, who I promised anonymity in response to their responses. So I'm not going to give that away, but it's pretty obvious who it was. I wrote a letter to Finlayson's son about this, and as part of Finlayson's story to Henry Duda, this was back in 1994. Thomas Devine wrote Finlayson 2 letters about this. Of course, Devine wanted to hear Finlayson's account and wanted to get it down word for word and wanted to use Finlayson to help him make the case. Of course, Finlayson was taken to Quantico by agents, by United States Marshals. According to Finlayson and what he told Duda, he was taken somehow. One of Devine's letters was intercepted by the government, and Finlayson was taken to Quantico, Virginia, and debriefed there and told that he was still under oath, that he could not talk about this. And this was in 1994. Can you imagine?
The depravity knows no depths.
It's a mind-boggler. It's just one thing after another. One thing, it just never ends. I mean, I could be getting myself in trouble now. I mean, who knows? But it's in the book. It's been in the book. They know about us, and they didn't bother Devine. They didn't bother Fred Goerner. They didn't bother. They're so confident that the false narrative will hold up. That they just don't care.
Yeah, I'm
talking about the government.
They'll take a show like this and bury it. When I put this up on YouTube, you never know. YouTube might throw a copyright up on it and take it off of YouTube. But it's going to be on.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's going to be on my website.
You know what?
Go ahead.
There is also a researcher named Rich Martini, that has been to Saipan. Now, if anything, I'm still looking for the 3 flag officers. We need to at least talk about them before we go away. But this Rich Martini's a Hollywood writer and director, and he went to Saipan just recently, in recent months, and went there and did his own investigation, talked to some old people who had some family members that were witnesses in the old days. And Martini went and he dug under Asleto Field. I mean, you talk about trying to find a needle in a haystack. Of course, he found nothing, but I mean, he went over there and he made the effort. And Martini did a blog and everything about this. Now, you would think that this would be news. It was big news on Saipan when Martini was over there just recently, but not one single news organization, newspaper, radio station, blog, except Martini's, you name it. Not one single news outlet in this country covered Martini's recent excursion to Saipan in search of more evidence about Earhart on Saipan. I mean, what else do you need to know that the cover-up is alive and well? All Gillespie has to do is look cross-eyed at the media, and he gets a front page, a full, a treatment about his latest cockeyed theory about how some piece of garbage is related to Amelia Earhart. He gets front page coverage. Martini goes over there and talks to people that actually who had relatives who saw Earhart, and he gets nothing. Okay?
Yeah.
Nothing.
You just mentioned the flag officers. We're talking about names like Nimitz. We're talking about names like Vandergrift. Graysby Erskine would be one of them too, I think.
Yes.
Wouldn't he?
Yes.
And you wanted to make sure that we mention and talk about somebody that you know, Mr. Golden.
Yeah. Okay. We'll talk about.
Take your pick.
Well, Jim Golden was a good friend of Fred Goerner's in the 1960s. Jim Golden has an incredible story of his own. He was once Howard Hughes' director of security in Las Vegas. He was Secret Service for Eisenhower and Nixon when Nixon was VP in the 50s. Jim Golden was a Marine intelligence photographer on Saipan. Not Saipan, I'm sorry. He was on Saipan, yes, but he was on Kwajalein in January 1944, and he talked to 2 Marine intelligence officers on Kwajalein who told him about their own interviews with natives on Saipan who indicated the presence of Amelia Earhart and her airplane on Saipan. This is how Golden, at a very young age, became hooked on this story. He later contacted Goerner and was a very good friend of Goerner's, trying to find the files, the Earhart files. Golden set me up with an interview with a guy named Robert Peliquin, who was an O&I officer during the 1980s. He was a reserve O&I officer, and he was also president of a corporation, a security corporation called Intertel in the 80s and 90s, which was an international security firm. Golden met Peliquin because Golden was vice president of Intertel, and Peliquin was the president of Intertel. Okay, so Peliquin told me in a phone interview that he admitted he had seen the Earhart files, and he told me that he couldn't tell me much else about it because he was still bound by an oath. Can you imagine this? In 2008, Peliquin, who's about 79 or 80 years old. He just died a couple years ago, telling me that he's still bound by an oath and still afraid to tell me what he saw in those files. But he did tell me this. He said it was generally accepted in intelligence circles that Amelia Earhart died under the aegis of the Japanese. I mean, this is bureaucratese for, the Japanese had her, and that's where she died. This is as much as Peliquin would admit to me in 2008. Okay?
That's amazing.
So that's all in the book as well, Bill.
Yes, that's folks. Everything we're talking about tonight is in Mike's book. You really, really need to get this book. His website is EarhartTruth.com. Amelia Earhart.
That's one.
The
that's
Truth.
That's one word. EarhartTruth.com.
And
EarhartTruth.com.
Yep, and you can buy the book
Please,
there.
you know,
You can buy you can buy the book at my site. You can buy the book at the site for the blogtalkradio.com show. I have a link to buy the book there. You can buy the book just click on one of the links somewhere. Go to Mike's site and buy the book.
You can click on the Amazon. It's less than $5 on Amazon. I mean, it's an absolute steal for the Kindle. The Kindle's less than $5. The 460-page paperback is less than $16. I mean, this is not just a book. This is a cause. Amelia Earhart, The Truth at Last, is a cause, not just something you read and put back on your bookshelf. I mean, if we had millions of people that actually got behind this, we might be able to get something done. I mean, but because back in the 60s, Fred Goerner almost broke through. JFK, we talk about this as well. JFK wanted to help Goerner, and he let Goerner see some files, but he wouldn't let him copy the files. He wouldn't let him he would only let him bring a pencil in there and write down what he saw. Ross Game, who was a very good friend of Goerner's, who went to Washington with Goerner at one point, told me that he was told by someone, he wouldn't tell me the source, but he was told that FDR had issued a secret executive order that the Earhart files, the truth about the Earhart case, would never be revealed except by a president, that no one else had the authority to do that. Okay? Now, let's talk about the three flag officers before we run out of time. We have the word of, first of all, Chester Nimitz, Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, the iconic World War II Navy commander who was in charge of the Pacific Fleet. In 1965 March, while Goerner was going to Washington, right before he left San Francisco, Goerner had a conversation with Nimitz. Nimitz and Goerner had become friends. Nimitz had encouraged Goerner in his work. However, Nimitz up until then had not told him anything definitive. But in a phone conversation, Goerner says that Nimitz told him, now that you're going to Washington, Fred, I want to tell you, Earhart and her navigator did go down in the Marshalls and were picked up by the Japanese. This revelation from Goerner, or from Nimitz to Goerner, was huge. And Goerner made a big deal out of this, and in his life he said Nimitz was probably that he admired him more than any person he had ever met, and Nimitz was well known throughout the Navy, and he was a celebrity. He was a national celebrity. He was well known for his integrity and for his he was never accused, never involved in any sort of scandal, never accused of anything. I mean, his word was gold, And so Goerner said that after 5 years of effort, the former commander of U.S. naval forces in the Pacific was telling me it had not been wasted. Okay, so we have Nimitz there. Now we have, in November 1966, several months after the book, Goerner's book, The Search for Amelia Earhart, was released, we have retired General Gravesby Erskine. He was a Marine Brigadier General on Saipan. He was the Deputy Commander of the V Amphibious Corps during the invasion. He accepted Goerner's invitation to visit him at his radio studio at KCBS. While waiting to go on the air with Goerner, Erskine told Jules Dundee, CBS West Coast Vice President, and Dave McElhatton, a KCBS newsman, quote, "It was established that Earhart was on Saipan. You'll have to dig out the rest for yourselves." Thirdly, we have General Alexander A. Vandegrift, the 18th Commandant of the Marine Corps. He was Commandant of the Marine Corps during the time that the Electra was found on Saipan in 1944. He privately admitted the truth to Goerner in a handwritten 1971 letter. Quote, General Tommy Watson, who commanded the 2nd Marine Division during the assault on Saipan and stayed on that island after the fall of Okinawa, on one of my 7 visits of inspection of his division, told me that it had been substantiated that Miss Earhart met her death on Saipan. This is what Vandegrift wrote to Goerner. Then he says, "That is the total knowledge that I have of this incident. In writing to you, I did not realize that you wanted to quote my remarks about Miss Earhart, and I would rather that you would not." So here we have General Alexander A. Vandergrift telling Goerner in 1971 that he had been told by a dead general that Amelia Earhart was on Saipan. He was still afraid about releasing this information because he was still a Marine as a general. He was still officially on active duty, and he could have been fried for telling Goerner this. But he did it anyway because he was practically on his deathbed. He died a year later or so. Okay? So here we have 3 flag officers encouraging Goerner in his work, all going against the establishment doctrine and the dogma that they should not tell him a word about the truth, telling Goerner that what happened because they admired Goerner. They admired him, his tenacity and his courage for trying to get this information out. And none of these people's word could have possibly been questioned at any point. I mean, and why would you? What reason would any of them have had to lie to Fred Goerner?
Yeah, especially when they're telling basically the same story to him.
And they're not telling him much either.
No, they're not telling him much, but essentially they're telling him the same thing, and unless those 3 got together and said, hey, let's screw around with this Goerner guy, and, we'll each write him a letter or tell him that it really happened like that. Unless they did that, and those 3 are conspiring, then they're telling the truth about what happened.
Absolutely. Then they had no reason to lie. Vandergrift was a Medal of Honor winner. In those days, Medal of Honor winners, their word was gold. Graves Erskine was a 4-star general when he retired. These people, they were sick of the cover-up themselves. They were sick of all of it, and they all died within 2 years of telling Goerner about this from natural causes. So they just felt I'm sure they felt they had nothing to lose at that point. They had nothing to lose. And the only one of the three that was
90 seconds
was Nimitz's comment to Goerner. That was in his book, Search for Amelia Earhart. But the other two comments from Vandergrift and Erskine were never published until my book, the Amelia Earhart, The Truth at Last. They're in there. There was a huge magazine article in England by a magazine called Orbis in which Goerner talked about Erskine's revelations
60
to him
seconds.
and Vandergrift's revelations to him. But that was a British magazine that carried this information. It was never picked up in this country, never. And you can bet that our media was quite well aware of Orbis's expose by Fred Goerner about what happened, but they wouldn't breathe a word of it in our media here. And it just goes, and to this day, there's just no getting through this media brick wall about the truth about Earhart. They all have their marching orders in the major media. It's not as if they're all getting together and saying, okay, we're not going to say anything about Earhart. I found people like you, who are willing to stick their neck out in little radio stations and
10
independent
seconds.
stations around the country, but not one major media, outlet will go near it. And I've been ignored by thousands, Bill. I've been ignored by thousands. I've approached everybody with this. They just ignore me. They don't even grant me a response. They just ignore you, and that's the worst.
Well, you know what, Mike? As soon as your offer to be on the show came across my desk, I jumped on it the same day that I think within 5 minutes after I got the email, because it's for my generation, your generation. You're a little bit older than I am, and I think some people in this generation, it is a tantalizing story of what happened, and I think it's a stunning example of what our government does when they're not being watched. I mean, it's amazing. But we are about out of time, and I want to thank you for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. This is just an absolute stunning story, and people need to get out and buy this book, Amelia Earhart, The Truth at Last. It's on Amazon. It's on Mike's website, earharttruth.com, all one word. And hold on a second, Mike, and let me switch recorders here just for a second. Hold on. Okay, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Blog Talk lets us talk for 5 or 6 minutes after the show ends. So we are still recording for the YouTube version of the show, which is goes a little bit longer than the